Hello and welcome to the Latimer Show. You know, this is the show where we sit back with everyday normal people and we make daily conversation. And today we'll be talking about Alzheimer's. You know, Alzheimer's affect 5.4 millions of Americans each year. So here today to speak about Alzheimer's, we have Julie Dusing, and she is going to talk with us about Alzheimer's. Welcome to the show, Julie.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
And it's a pleasure to have you here. I feel very honored to have you here with us today.
Thank
you. So tell us, what is Alzheimer's?
Alzheimer's is primarily a disease, and it affects, as you said, over 5.4 million Americans. It is a disease that affects the brain, usually first noticed by short-term memory losses. And we have a whole program that we do on Know the 10 Warning Signs of the disease. Many times people will ask me, what's the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's? And I always describe it that dementia is like an overall umbrella. It's like the umbrella of fruits or vegetables, and underneath that umbrella are all the different kinds of fruits or cancers or vegetables, whatever it is that we're talking about. Dementia is the umbrella, and 70% of dementias is Alzheimer's. It's the Alzheimer's disease. Then there's other things like Lewy body or frontal temporal disease or mixed dementias or vascular dementia. I could go on and on. There's a lot of different other dementias that fall under that umbrella. So Alzheimer's is a form of dementia, and it is a disease that affects usually women more than men simply because women live longer.
Now, what causes Alzheimer's? Because it was my understanding that Alzheimer's is due to some type of plaque buildup in the brains that destroys your brain cells, which brings on dementia, like you spoken earlier about the memory loss and other kind of things. So, but what can we add to that so people that's watching back home will be able to understand what Alzheimer's really is?
Yeah, I think that is the question: is what causes it? And we really don't know. The scientists and the researchers are really looking for the biomarkers to tell us who may or may not get the disease down the road. We're not there yet. That's why research is so very, very important. But what we do know is exactly what you said, is that brain cells are dying. There's plaques and there's tangles, and what happens inside the brain is that the neuron is cut off and dies. And the neuron is really what is the transmitter to tell that neuron. There's a signal that comes up, tries to connect here to get to the correct place to tell the body what to do, for instance, to breathe, to speak, to move, whatever it might be. Alzheimer's starts in a certain part of the brain, and it's not always in the same place for everybody. So depending on the part of the brain that is being affected by these plaques and tangles and by the neurons dying off is where we'll start to see things like short-term memory loss. We may start to see things like gait or balance is affected. Language could be affected. Things like being able to remember words or phrases or games or rules or whatever. It just depends on where in the brain the disease is affecting it. So that's kind of my little non-medical way of describing it. It's neurons that are dying off because of all the plaques and tangles that are in the brain and being affected.
Okay. Now, can it affect any other organs in the body?
It's primarily a brain disease, but what happens, and people don't understand this, Alzheimer's is really a progressive disease, and it is one that goes downhill. No one recovers from Alzheimer's. There is no survival rate with Alzheimer's. It is eventually a fatal disease. And what happens is that people either die of the disease or complications of the disease. So sometimes people will have trouble breathing, or it may be complications with pneumonia or heart problems or diabetes or vascular problems. There's all kinds of things that could enter into the picture, but eventually the brain starts, the cells start dying, and our brainstem is where all of our swallowing, breathing, eating, all of those impulses are there. And when those neurons are no longer existing in that part of the brain, it can't give the command to do what it needs to do. Swallow, breathe, eat.
So it can become a very scary situation for an individual,
It is.
who's going, through this. What are some of the steps that we should know in understanding Alzheimer's?
I'm going to talk a little bit about know the 10 warning signs. I thought today might be a good educational tool, and I'm going to refer down to them. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because we do a whole program. We have online e-learning courses that are called Know the 10 Warning Signs. But for any of us over a certain age, we all start to be concerned. Oops, was that a slip, or is this a problem that I need to worry about? So we all are kind of talking about that. And I know someone who's in their 30s who has Alzheimer's. So it's not just Alzheimer's disease. It's not somebody that's older. It can affect people of all ages. So I think one of the first things that we talk about all the time is memory loss. It's short-term memory. Learning and forgetting something that you just heard or learned. That's short-term memory. Number 2 could be challenges in planning or solving problems. Somebody who's always been very good at taking a problem solving, thinking it through, all of a sudden now they can't do that. They can't process in the same way. So that can be a problem. Number 3 would be difficulty completing familiar tasks. Following a normal recipe, making the batch of cookies that you've done from memory all of your life, and all of a sudden you use a cup of salt instead of a cup of sugar. And those cookies aren't going to taste very good, So things that were always familiar and easy for you to do now become more difficult, or you can't do them. Number 4 would be something like confusion with time or place. A lot of times people will ask the same thing over. What day is it today? What time is it today? They're not understanding that you just told them it's Thursday, and they're asking again. So it's just confusion, some major confusion that sets in.
Sometimes we kind of see this with patients who suffer from Down syndrome. They don't know the time of days, and I mean, not time of days, but they don't know the time of the hour, and then they also don't know the days of the week.
Yes, and it's interesting that you brought up Down syndrome, because someone who lives long enough with Down syndrome will get Alzheimer's disease. So they are linked very closely. So that makes sense with what you're saying, Number 5 would be understanding. They have trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. Things like being able to see correctly, being able to understand that the border of black around the carpet isn't a deep hole that they're going to fall into, and be afraid to walk over that piece of carpet because it's a different color. Spatial relationships and things become very confusing to them. And number 6 would be like new problems in speaking and writing. Word finding is huge, even with someone who has mild cognitive impairment, which is sometimes can be, someone can have some deficit cognitively before they're even into Alzheimer's disease. And we've heard someone speak recently, and she said that the hardest thing for her was she was a journalist, and she was struggling to find the word. And her whole life, 40 years of a career, had been finding words and putting just the right word into an article. So that becomes problematic for someone. They can't find the word, they can't remember it, they can't bring it to their mind when they need to, when they're trying to, converse with someone. And number 7 would be misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace steps. We see that a lot. Have you lost your keys lately? Have you ever lost your keys? Okay. What do we do when we lose our keys? We retrace our steps, don't we? We go back and we think, all right, when did I last drive the car? What was I wearing? Which jacket? Where did I put it? And we retrace back. Someone who loses their keys with a disease may find the keys and then not be exactly sure what to do with them.
Right. They forget why they were
exactly
getting
why
the keys.
why did I need these? What do I do with them? Where do I put them? A lot of people have trouble with driving anyway, and we had a lady who found her keys, and she sat in the car and didn't know what to do with the keys. And she sat there for 15 minutes, and she was on her way to the grocery store, could not remember what to do with the keys. So that's a warning sign, okay? Number 8 would be decreased or poor judgment. And you hear a lot, and you may have had people on your show concerning senior scams, people who are taking advantage of seniors. Seniors who have poor judgment in that they are writing checks to everyone who is asking or is needy or is a great salesperson or someone on TV asking for money. We heard of a lady who exhausted her entire bank account within 6 months before her kids picked up on, oops, warning sign, okay? So to be careful of that poor judgment and how they're thinking. Number 9 would be withdrawal from work or social activities. Basically, this is where folks who have always been outgoing, love to be around people, now all of that becomes very confusing to them. It's noisy, they can't participate in conversation in the same way, and they start drawing back and wanting to remain at home where they feel safe, and it kind of becomes a comfort zone for them. And number 10, we went through these really fast, but number 10 is changes in mood and personality. And we're talking about someone who has always been sweet and dear and lovable and little church lady that wouldn't hurt a flea. When she gets the disease, can swear like a sailor. You know, all of a sudden, that total personality and mood swings. We've also heard about the abusive, not so nice, ornery person who gets the disease and turns into a teddy bear. So you have the two different spectrums there.
It can go either way.
It can. And not everybody has all 10 of these. That's not the point. What we want to make sure is that people understand that these are the top 10 warning signs. If you start to see 1, 2, or 3 of these in yourself or in a loved one, it's time to go to the doctor. It's time to get a professional assessment. It's time to put together a medical team if you are diagnosed with this disease, and then start putting plans into place for your remaining years and how you want those to play out.
Now, is there any preventative stages that we can discuss that can help warn out before this disease attack them? Of course, no one really knows if this disease will actually, come about in your life. But you never know.
You don't know.
You never know what the outcome will come about.
And one of the things that I say to people, we used to do a program called Maintain Your Brain, and we don't do that any longer because people think, well, if I do this, 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 and this, you said do this, 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 and this, that will keep me from getting the disease. And we don't know what causes it, therefore we don't know totally how to prevent it.
Right.
But on a personal side, I feel very strongly that lifestyle choices can make a difference just to be overall healthy. And brain healthy equals heart healthy. If there are heart healthy foods, they're brain healthy foods too, because they're very closely connected. So there are things that I think that we can do with exercise everything in moderation, eating correctly. You know, we can go into all the leafy green vegetables and all those things that we used to talk about. But just because you do all of that doesn't mean it's going to prevent the disease. We wish we knew what caused it so that we could be more preventative in our approach.
So there's not really too many treatment plans, you know, to treat this illness.
There really isn't. In fact, one of the saddest things to me is that in the last 10 years, there has not been another FDA-approved medication for the disease. And the disease does not have a medicine that will cure it. It's the only disease. We're the 6th leading cause of death in the United States. The other 5 have all seen a decrease in the numbers of death. We're the 6th, and the graph goes this way. We see an increase in the disease, whereas in the other fatal diseases, we're starting to see some cures or some medicines or some things that are helpful for those diseases. That's why, as the population ages, we really are not in a position to really be able to handle all of what's coming down the road with this disease. So, you know, I'm passionate about finding a cure. And in order to find a cure, it takes the funds for research. And that is just so very important that we advocate to our legislators, that we find people who understand that this disease and the cure takes money, time, and researchers who are willing to put their lives on the line to be able to find what we need to prevent this disease.
Now, what are some of the ways that we can help people with this type of disease to live a better, comfortable life? What are some of the ways that you think we can
I think
do?
that's a good question. I think that, again, there's a little brochure that we have of, if you know someone with the disease, how can you help them? And sometimes it's as simple as saying to the caregiver, I know you need a break. What can I do to come in? Can I come in for a couple hours every week and sit with your husband while you go and get groceries or go to the dentist or whatever they might need as a form of respite? So families that are dealing with this disease, that caregiver is 24/7 taking care of this person, especially in the middle and later stages when they can't leave them alone any longer because of safety issues. It's very important that we help those families, that we ask what we can do and be concrete about it. You know, I have every Thursday afternoon that I could come and sit with him. Would that help? You know, things like family members putting together a schedule or a calendar that every weekend mom can get away for a few hours because the family's coming in to be there with dad. It could be simply to the person with the disease, learning how to talk directly to them. Don't come up behind them. Don't startle them with your presence, but talking to them, looking eye to eye, being very patient. You might hear the same story 4 times in the hour that you're sitting with them, but allow them to take their time. Don't talk nearly as fast as I talk. You know, just couching what you say, words like remember and always, try to take those out of your vocabulary because they're not remembering. And when you say, well, what year was it when you did whatever, or what year did you marry grandma? That may be a difficult question. So really think about asking open-ended questions, asking questions that they can just talk about. Gee, what was it like when you met grandma? You know, not specifics of timing and all of that. So I could go on and on about. There's a lot of things that we can do to really help someone with the disease, and more importantly, those that are caring for that person.
Now, how can we educate the public, about Alzheimer's. I know we went through the first 10 steps of the signs that,
Right.
of understanding
Right.
Alzheimer's, but how can we really educate them to the point where they will understand exactly what is going on and can probably play a better role in someone's life, with this disease? Because I take it that it's very frustrating to have this disease, as the person who's being treated for it. And then it's also very frustrating for a person who does not understand this disease, and to care for someone with a disease.
Yes. It's very important that, especially those people who have been diagnosed, all of their circle of friends and family should educate themselves on the disease. There are certain things that will make the whole process go more smoothly. You never argue with someone with the disease because you're not going to win the argument, and it only brings a level of frustration to their lives. So you learn how to kind of sidetrack and sidestep and redirect and refocus the conversation on a happier time, a happier place, to kind of take them away from that feeling of irritability or aggression or just
that sense of
confusion.
loss. I'm going to go to commercial break, and when I come back from commercial break, we're going to further discuss more ways how we can help people with Alzheimer's. I'll be right back after this break.
Want to make conversations and be a guest on The Latimer Show? Like us on Facebook, The Latimer Show, with real people with real conversations. Are you a real person with a real conversation and like to be a guest on The Latimer Show? Then find us on Facebook, The Latimer Show, with real people with real conversations.
Don't change that channel. You're watching The Latimer Show. You're watching The Latimer Show.
You're watching The Latimer Show.
Hello and welcome back. I'm sitting here making conversations with Julie Dusing, and we've been talking about Alzheimer's. So we're going to continue our conversation about Alzheimer's.
Good. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the educational programs that are available. I mentioned earlier that we have some courses that are online at www.alz.org. You can just click on the educational programmings. There's an online learning classes. There's all kinds of educational programs. We find that for many of our caregivers who can't get away, that need to stay there in the caregiving role, can get on a computer and educate themselves that way. We also have all kinds of brochures and information that by calling our 800 number, our helpline number, 800-272-3900, they can also get that information. And then we do local programs within our communities. For instance, we just finished a Living with Alzheimer's early stage program here in Battle Creek. We are getting ready to do Living with Alzheimer's middle stage program. These are for caregivers to come out and learn more about the disease and what takes place in the middle stages of the disease. And that's going to be in May at the Heritage on South Helmer Road. And then we're going to have in the fall the late stage, and that's a two-part series, and we talk about what can our caregivers expect in those late stages of the disease. And that will be at the memory care at Reflections, again, on South Helmer Road. So those are some things that we have coming up. We also have caregiver support groups. And we have a new one starting here in Battle Creek this month, which I really want to do a little commercial right now. But for those people, it will take place the third Tuesday of every month from 6 to 7:30, and it will be at Lakeview Senior Living, again on South Helmer Road. So we're very excited. Anyone who is in a caregiving role, whether it be a son, daughter, husband, wife, whoever is caring for someone as a family member can come and be part of this group and get support from each other and from the facilitators. We have co-facilitators that will be heading up this group. We also have another wonderful caregiver support group that takes place at Burnham Brook Community Center, and that is the third Wednesday from 2:30 until 4 o'clock every month.
Now, where's that located?
That is located right downtown, just a couple of blocks from downtown, right here. The Burnham Brook Center is on, I have it right here, 200 West Michigan.
Okay, just right off from our studio from downtown.
It's just right
Battle
off
Creek.
from the studio. It's just a couple blocks away. So we have one downtown, and then we have one out a little ways on Helmer Road South. And Lakeview Senior Living is a brand new Ganton Senior Communities. It's a brand new facility for independent living for seniors. It's lovely and has wonderful food.
And so they specialize over at the Living Center. They specialize dealing with people with Alzheimer's and dementia.
They do at Reflections.
Okay.
This particular place where we're holding these educational programs has an independent living, then the Heritage is assisted living, and then Reflections is more the memory care or Alzheimer's dementia facility that is strictly geared for people who are dealing with the disease. And they have some lovely, caring people who work there that help to care for those folks.
Because this is a caring disease, we need to learn more about it. Researchers are trying to develop more ways of how to treat this particular disease. You know, I told you earlier, it is a very touchy topic to speak about because Alzheimer's can happen to anyone. And just like Julie said, you can be 30 years old, you know, and you come down with Alzheimer's, you know, and we've spoken about some of the early stages of Alzheimer's. And one of the number one stages about Alzheimer's is the memory loss. When you start forgetting little things like you mentioned earlier about your car keys, or you might forget that, you know, you had to go pick your kids up at a certain particular time, or you didn't make dinner, or you made dinner and you forgot that it was cooking on the stove.
There you go.
You know, so it's all kind of things that can go on in your life when you have a disease like Alzheimer's. And that's one of the reasons why we are talking about this disease today. We want to enlighten you about Alzheimer's because it has not gone anywhere. Many years ago, probably way before my time, they used to consider Alzheimer's as something as senile.
Senility, yep.
Yeah,
hardening of the arteries.
Right, yeah, hardening of the arteries.
Right.
Yeah, we used to say things like that.
That's right, because we didn't really know what it was or what to call it, but we knew that all of those symptoms that people had, they were experiencing, and now we know that it was Alzheimer's or dementia.
Right. So we kind of get a grip on that, but we still have a lot more work to do. Right. You know, for Alzheimer's.
You brought up something so important too, and that's the safety factor. When you've cooked the meal but you forgot it's still on the stove, you know, leaving a pot of something on the stove and walking away and forgetting that it's there, that's a fire hazard. That is a safety issue. Driving the car and not knowing how to get back home again, that's a safety issue. Having judgment issues, you know, pulling into and out of a parking space, safety issue, because a lot of people recognize, oops, mom's got a lot of little dings on her fender lately. I wonder what that's all about, because she's having trouble with those spatial distance and judgment, judgment calls. So a lot of that is safety. Would you put your loved one in a car with someone who you're not sure is going to be able to find their way back again?
Right, and some of the safety issues too could be, leaving a person with this disease at home and leaving them there unattended, and then someone come and knock on the door.
That's
they
right.
don't know who that person is,
And they
so
invite
they would
them in.
Yeah, invite them right
You
on
got
in.
it.
Could leave right out with them.
That's
right. and because they don't have no recollection.
And they're
of
very
anything.
vulnerable.
Vulnerable adults,
Yeah,
right.
exactly. So a lot of what we deal with is that safety component and educating ourselves on that. And at what time do we no longer leave our loved ones at home who have the disease? And there comes a time where it's no longer safe for that to happen.
Right. We're going to go into a break, and when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation with Alzheimer's. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back. I've been sitting here talking with my friend Julie Dusing, and we've been talking about Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is a very, very important disease that's worthwhile of discussing, because not only can you contract this disease when you are an elderly person, like over the age 65, but you also can contract this disease when you are in your 30s or 40s. So we want to educate the public about Alzheimer's disease. So we've been sitting here making this conversation about it, and we hope so far that you've been enjoying this conversation. So we're going to continue with talking about Alzheimer's, and Julie is going to lead us into the next segment of talking about Alzheimer's. Julie.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having us today. I work, as you know, for the Alzheimer's Association, and I'm the program coordinator for 6 counties within our chapter. So we are the Michigan Great Lakes chapter, and I'm part of the Capital Area region. And Calhoun County is one of those 6 chapters that I get the privilege of being program coordinator, in that we do our educational programs, we do our caregiver support groups, and we do a number of new programs and things that are coming out. In one of our other counties, we had the privilege of being a pilot for a program with early stage social engagement. It was a program that worked with our early stage. People like you and I that have just been given a diagnosis are now, what do I do? And a lot of people want to isolate themselves. They want to stay at home. They become depressed. All kinds of things can be part of that. And we really want to engage our early stage people in staying active, staying socially interactive, giving them venues and opportunities for outings. And it's probably been one of my favorite things that I've done with the chapter is to start this group of about 6 to 9 individuals and their care partners come together twice a month, and we meet for coffee or lunch one time, and then we go on an outing. We've seen everything from plays to the zoo to nature centers to butterfly gardens next month, and we do all kinds of activities to keep them active and engaged. And what's so neat is that these are other people like themselves that are in those early stages of the disease. And, who do you talk to? And this now gives them a group that they can connect with, they can talk to, and their care partners can work with each other, talk to each other, call each other up in between our outings, and be able to be supportive to one another.
Now, you mentioned earlier about the 6 chapters that you covered.
6 counties.
6 counties, sorry. 6 counties. Let's kind of like talk a little bit about each county. It sounds very interesting. And so let's talk a little bit about, the 6 counties, because that is a big, huge job.
That's a big
for
area.
you to do. And I know you stay busy a lot.
I do. We had a hard time even coming together on this interview. I do stay busy, and I'm really happy that I get to cover. The 6 counties are primarily up in the Lansing areas, Ingham, Eaton, and Clinton counties. And then I drop down and I have Jackson, and I have Calhoun, and I have Berry counties. So I really work a lot and have for the last 7 years up in the Lansing area. I worked for a non-medical caregiving company, and so I was primarily in 4 counties up there. And so I started to, as a client care coordinator, I started to get phone calls, and they were constantly about people who needed help because their loved one had Alzheimer's and dementia. And I realized I didn't know much about the disease. And so I contacted the Alzheimer's Association, and I started to educate myself. I went to every program I could go to. I went online. I started to really start to understand the disease so I could better understand our potential clients and what their needs were and what our caregivers could do when they went in to give respite. So that is how I got involved and decided that I would like to do some public speaking as a volunteer for the association. So about 6 or 7 years ago, I volunteered to be a public speaker for them. And then I volunteered and took the training to be a caregiver facilitator for our support groups. And I did that for about 2 years before I was hired full-time 2 years ago to work for the association. So my background kind of came into the association because I needed to know and educate myself about the disease. And I think we all need to do that because when I do my programs, I always start out, how many of you here either know someone or has cared for someone or has lost someone from Alzheimer's or dementia? And almost without a doubt, every hand goes up. So we all know about it. Let's really educate ourselves about it so that we can be as helpful within our communities as possible. There's all kinds of volunteer opportunities out there with our association.
No, I think it was one of our presidents was suffering from Alzheimer's.
That's right.
And I forgot who that was. I don't know
President
if it was
Reagan. It was
I was
Reagan.
going to say Reagan.
Yep,
but I
you're
was
right.
thinking about President Bush Sr., not Jr.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah, it was President Reagan.
President Reagan, and he really helped to bring the disease to the forefront. Since then, we've had Glenn Campbell. You know, a lot of us grew up with his music. He is now on his last final tour of singing. He has the disease. We have Pat Summitt, the volunteer women's coach for the Tennessee Volunteers basketball. She has what's called early onset or younger onset. She has stepped into the limelight and has said that she has the disease. And you know, with each one of these celebrities or these public persons coming forward, it helps there to be less of a stigma about the disease because for years nobody wanted to tell anyone.
Talk about it because they're embarrassed about it. And
anything
really
that has to do with the brain or mental seems to have a stigma. And so what we're trying to do is to educate people so that the stigma is lessened and people will come out and learn more about the disease and not be afraid to step up and talk about it.
Right. You know, and they should, though, because we live in a society where we always throwing labels on every little thing, and no one really likes to get labeled.
Nope,
you know,
we don't.
so you know, it's nothing to be embarrassed about. You know, because anyone can come down with this particular disease.
And it's interesting, you know, if you have cancer or if you have diabetes, you know, there's no stigma. That's something that you need to take care of medically and deal with. And this is the same thing. You know, there shouldn't be that stigma that something's so wrong, you know, but there is. And so we're trying to break down those barriers and those stigmas with education.
Anything that has to do with psychological, you know, in the mind, people don't want to be labeled as you crazy. Or you weird, or you just dumb and stupid because you just can't remember something. And that is not true because some of the most educated people can contract this disease.
That's
you know,
exactly
and
right.
Back when I was in behavioral medicine many years ago, I did have a patient, you know, way before this show, but it's been a long time. But I had a patient who was a physician, actually he was a surgeon, and he would perform surgery, over in the Philippines. And when he got back here to the United States, he found out that he had Alzheimer's. And I watched him go from being this brilliant physician, surgeon, from not even knowing that he was a doctor.
That's right.
And it was really hard for his family to watch this, watch their father, husband, brilliant person. He'd been a surgeon for over 20-some years,
Yes.
and then now he has developed Alzheimer's. And it almost seems that it's not even fair itself.
Yeah.
But, this disease doesn't discriminate
No,
against
it doesn't.
your education, your race, your background, how much money you're making, It
doesn't.
finds its way into anyone.
That's right.
Almost, though.
That's right.
And it makes it a scary situation.
It is.
For a person who is going, through this.
Right. It's a dreadful disease, but we do have a reason to hope, and that's what I like to let everyone think about. There is a reason to hope, and our hope lies in finding a cure. And the way to do that is to help fund the research. And that's our reason to hope.
Now, is there any organizations, just in case people out there are listening or watching this show on television, is there any organizations that we can make a contribution to? Or is there any organizations out there where we can volunteer our time? Because sometimes, it's good to make a contribution, to science and to organizations that need these funds to help develop more research in finding a cure for these diseases. But it's also very important if we volunteer our time.
That's right.
To people.
And of course, we would like for the Alzheimer's Association to be the uppermost thought process for education, for being able to make contributions. We are always looking for donors and people who would like to help fund the research and be involved in our mission, which is our vision is a world without Alzheimer's. So we're really adamant about finding a cure. And also, there are so many volunteer places within our association as a volunteer presenter, as a caregiver support group facilitator, office support staff, helping with mailings or putting together educational program folders. There are so many different things, I can't even think of all of them. And one of the major ways that we raise money is through our Walks to End Alzheimer's. And we have local walks coming up in Kalamazoo, which will be September the 22nd at Salary Flats. And then also in Jackson is the other closest one, and that would be September 8th at Cascades Park. So you can look those exact dates and times up on our website, again, at alz.org.
Okay, very good. And then you also can follow the Latimer Show, because we would definitely post these dates and times where you can also participate, help out, in finding ways to help people with Alzheimer's. And we most certainly will appreciate it, because you never know your journey in life. You never know where you may end up. And you could be one of the persons that come down with Alzheimer's, and it don't even have to be Alzheimer's. It could be dementia. It could be Huntington's disease. It could be sundown syndrome. And all these things, kind of connect in a way. And it's a very, very frightful and scary situation, for one. So, Julie, do you have anything else that you would like to add?
Not really. I think we covered a whole gamut of information, and I hope it's been helpful. And again, from an educational standpoint and from an advocate, becoming an advocate of what we're trying to do with our legislators and being able to raise the funds to find a cure, I have a reason to hope. I hope you do too.
I do too. And maybe you guys out there can write to your legislator and make them aware that this is very, very important. We can go across the world and we can police other countries, We can give out aid, like $1.3 billion, to other countries. But we need to start taking care home, and we really need to start taking care of some of these unknown diseases right here in the United States. We really need to start reaching out to our American people, because without the American people, we don't have anyone, at all, And I'm going to, end on that note, but I would like to thank Julie for coming out. She's a very busy person. She handles 6 counties, trying to help people function that's living with Alzheimer's. So I really appreciate you coming, Julie, and I'd like to thank you very much
Thank you.
for coming on the show.
It's
and
my
please come back and update us more about Alzheimer's. And that's all the time we have today for the Latimer Show. I'd like to thank you for tuning in with us, and please come back and join us on our next show. Thank you, and I always say peace and have a good day.